My stepson nearly burned my house down to get revenge, so I pressed charges, and now my wife is divorcing me. But I have one last move that will leave them both stunned. I, 42M, feel like I'm living in an alternate reality right now, and I'm honestly not sure how I got here. I own a small auto repair garage, which I've been running for nearly 2 decades. A few years back, I married my wife, 39F, who came with a teenage son, 18M. At first, I thought we'd eventually work through the usual growing pains of blending a family, but I had no idea I was walking into a ticking time bomb. The stuff that's gone down in the last few months has me questioning everything about my marriage, my future, and even my sense of right and wrong. When I first started dating my wife, her son was around 15. He had a bit of an attitude, but I chalked it up to normal teenage drama. I tried hard to be the cool stepdad. I'd take him out for burgers, invite him to come with me to check out classic cars on the weekends, and I even taught him some basic car maintenance. He never seemed too enthusiastic, but I figured it was just him being a typical teen who'd rather hang with his friends than with a middle-aged dude like me. Once we got married, though, his attitude got way worse. He'd roll his eyes at almost every single thing I said. If I tried to set even the most basic rule, like please take out the trash before heading to bed, he'd act like I was asking him to do a military-level chore. He'd slam doors, crank up his music late at night, and if I confronted him, he'd say stuff like, "You're not my real dad, so don't tell me what to do." Whenever I brought this up with my wife, she shrugged it off. She'd say, "You're overreacting, he's just being a teenager," or "You need to be more understanding." It got to the point where I felt like my hands were tied. I'd bring up something serious, like him skipping school or staying out till 2 a.m., and she'd rush to his defense, telling me he was misunderstood. If I tried to push back, she'd get defensive and we'd argue. So I thought, maybe I'll wait it out. He'll turn 18 soon, he'll hopefully mature, and we'll see a positive change. But I was so wrong. Right before he turned 18, there were these smaller incidents that felt like big red flags to me. Once, I found him snooping through my toolboxes in the garage at odd hours. Another time, I heard him trash-talking me on a phone call. I let those slide because I didn't want to start World War III in my own house, but I could sense this resentment toward me brewing under the surface. And my wife? She acted like I was making it up in my head. My parents came to visit me at one point. After spending a few hours with my stepson, my dad pulled me aside and said, "That boy's got a serious chip on his shoulder." My dad's old school, not the type to gossip or jump to conclusions, so that comment alone made me realize I wasn't imagining the tension. I felt uneasy, but I kept telling myself to have faith that once my stepson finished high school, maybe we could reset and get along better. Wishful thinking on my part. The real downward spiral started on a random Friday night, and it was partly my fault for ignoring obvious signs. I got home from the garage later than usual, covered in engine grease and just wanting a hot shower and some quiet. The moment I walked in, he was on the couch, making snarky remarks under his breath. I tried ignoring him because I didn't have the energy to fight, but then he said something like, "You gonna ground me for breathing, or what?" I told him to mind his attitude and went to my bedroom to change. My wife was out with friends, so it was just me and him in the house. I could already feel the tension in the air. An hour later, I heard him messing around in the garage. I went to check and saw him fiddling with old cans of paint thinner and some oily rags, stuff I keep for work, but I always store carefully because they're extremely flammable. I freaked out and told him to drop it. He just rolled his eyes and said, "Relax, I'm cleaning up." He looked irritated, like I was intruding on his private moment. I demanded he leave the garage. He kicked the toolbox on the way out, muttering curses at me. I figured maybe he was just being a jerk, blowing off steam. I had no clue how close we were to real disaster. I finished what I was doing in the garage, basically making sure everything was safely put away, then went back inside. It was around midnight when I dozed off on the couch. Suddenly, I smelled this intense burning odor, more than just a whiff. My heart practically jumped into my throat. I ran toward the back door and opened it, and that's when I saw it. The fence at the edge of our yard was on fire. It wasn't a towering inferno yet, but the flames were licking up one of the posts, and there was a patch of grass on fire near the base. And right there, standing next to it, was my stepson. He had this weird grin on his face, like he was proud of himself. I started yelling, "Have you lost your mind?" I grabbed the garden hose and sprayed the flames like a madman. Luckily, it hadn't spread far enough to reach the house or my garage, but a couple more minutes, and it might have. My wife had just come home maybe 10 minutes before all this. She came running outside when she heard me yelling. She freaked out, but the first thing she did was run to him, crying, asking if he was okay. I was staring at her in disbelief, like, of course he's okay. He's the one who set the fire. She kept saying he didn't mean for it to get out of control, and I was losing it. He smirked at me, then said something about how I should stop bossing him around or else things would get worse. That tore it for me. This wasn't just teenage rebelliousness. It was dangerously close to arson, plain and simple. My wife started begging me not to call the cops. She said he was just acting out, that we could handle it as a family. I thought about how we could have been asleep while he did this, how the flames could have spread to the garage or even the main house. That was too horrifying to ignore. I told her no, I wouldn't let it slide. She started crying, saying I'd ruin his future if I involved the law. But I dialed 911 anyway, because I wasn't about to ignore the fact that he set fire to my property. The cops arrived, asked questions, and took him to the station. He got officially booked for attempted arson and reckless endangerment. My wife was hysterical, telling me I was the villain who destroyed our family. In my mind, her son nearly burned our house down, so maybe that was the real issue. The next few hours were a blur of me pacing around the living room, feeling equal parts furious and terrified that this kid had such rage inside him. My wife locked herself in our bedroom, crying. I expected that once she calmed down, she'd realize how messed up the situation was and stand with me on setting boundaries. But I was wrong. Instead, she doubled down. The next morning, she begged me to drop the charges, or at least say it was an accident. I told her that wasn't how this worked. The cops had evidence of a burned fence, the yard was scorched, and if the prosecution wanted to move forward, they would. She kept insisting I tell the cops a made-up story about a campfire accident, but I refused. We screamed at each other until she finally stormed off to her sister's place. From there, everything escalated like a runaway train. My stepson had hearing coming up, and I had to explain to the judge how this wasn't just a minor slip-up, but a very intentional act. My wife's sister got involved, screaming at me in the courthouse hallway, calling me all kinds of ugly names for turning on family. Meanwhile, I was thinking, he set a freaking fire near my house. Are you hearing yourself? My wife eventually filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. She actually served me the papers at my workplace, which was just humiliating. I remember opening that envelope in front of a coworker who had no clue what was going on in my personal life. I felt this rush of anger and sadness all at once. She threatened to leave if I didn't drop the charges, but a part of me never believed she'd follow through so quickly. Yet here we were. Right around that time, I got myself a lawyer because I wanted to be sure I was handling everything the right way. He told me that, given the evidence, it was highly likely the state would press on with the charges. I was dealing with a knot in my stomach every day, feeling torn because I did love my wife, but also knowing I had to stand my ground. After all, if her son had no consequences, what would he do next time? Sure enough, the case went to court. I testified about what happened, and the cops presented their report. My stepson acted like he didn't care, just rolling his eyes and smirking, and that made me even angrier. He showed zero remorse. My wife refused to look at me. She was all about protecting him, even though he was so obviously in the wrong. The judge found enough evidence to proceed. Bail was set, and my stepson was kept in custody until it was paid. My wife's sister paid it, then went off on me again, telling me I'd regret this decision. I told her to leave me alone. When I got home that night, I was mentally drained. My house was quiet, my wife was gone, and I realized everything had changed in the span of a week. During this chaos, my lawyer asked if there was any long-term pattern of dangerous behavior. That's when I remembered the security cameras I'd installed around the outside of the house after a string of break-ins in our neighborhood. I put them in about 6 months before, mainly to keep an eye on the garage and the driveway. I decided to check the footage, not expecting much, but hoping I might find some clue that my stepson had been messing with flammable stuff before. What I found was way worse than I expected. There were multiple clips from the past few months where he was in the backyard late at night, lighting small papers on fire in a metal can. Another showed him rummaging around in my garage, talking to a friend on speakerphone, saying he was going to make life hell for me. There was even one clip of him chucking something flaming near the fence, but it went out before it caught. Basically, it proved this wasn't a one-time accident or an impulsive mistake. he'd been playing with fire literally for a while. I felt simultaneously enraged and weirdly relieved. Enraged because he'd been screwing around in such a dangerous way, and relieved because I now had undeniable proof. I gave the clips to my lawyer, and we handed them over to the prosecution. My lawyer said it was like a nail in the coffin for any defense claiming it was just a one-off. When my wife found out about the footage, she lost it. She accused me of spying, betraying her son's privacy, the works. I told her the cameras had been installed for security reasons, which she knew. But apparently, she thought I should have destroyed the footage to protect her son. At the same time, my wife's divorce proceedings started moving full steam ahead. She tried to argue that she deserved some share of my house, but I'd bought it well before we even started dating, and she never contributed to the mortgage or property taxes. My lawyer was quick to point that out. She also tried claiming that I was financially unstable because I run a small garage, but I have all the paperwork proving I make a consistent income. That angle didn't work out for her either. She ended up focusing more on trying to get the divorce finalized quickly, probably to distance herself from the legal fallout her son was dealing with. Meanwhile, I felt a huge amount of anger and grief. I'd married this woman expecting to build a life together, and in a matter of months, everything had blown up in my face because her son decided to start a fire on my property. I told my lawyer I wanted to protect myself and my property from them. He suggested filing a restraining order against my stepson due to the attempted arson, and I agreed. The judge granted a temporary protective order, meaning he couldn't come near my house or me. That obviously put more strain on my marriage, not that there was much left to save at that point. My wife raged about it, but I stuck to my decision. By the time we got into the final stages of the divorce, I was emotionally done. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me after what happened, so I refused to negotiate on the house. My lawyer made sure everything was super clear. She wasn't entitled to any of it. I also wanted language in the settlement that kept her son away. She was livid, but it wasn't like she had a legal leg to stand on. Eventually, the criminal case reached a point where my stepson ended up pleading guilty to some of the charges. He got probation, from what I understand. The judge was pretty harsh, telling him how serious his actions were. I wasn't there for the final part of the sentencing. I didn't need to be, but I heard from a mutual friend that he was just as defiant as ever. Whatever. He's their problem now. When the divorce got finalized, it was a weird mix of relief and sadness. I was relieved to be out of a situation where I was constantly disregarded and disrespected, and sad because, in spite of everything, I did once care about my wife. But the moment she chose to shield her son from consequences after a near disaster, the marriage was pretty much done. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I might have been stricter than she liked, or less patient than I should have been. But who wouldn't be furious if someone tried to set part of their home on fire? I don't feel sorry for pressing charges. It's not like he knocked over a lamp or broke a window by mistake. He literally tried to start a serious fire, and I can't just ignore that. If she wants to bail on our marriage because she thinks I'm too harsh, then so be it. So here I am, back in my house, alone but at least not walking on eggshells anymore. My parents called to check in on me, and they're on my side, saying he needed a wake-up call. Some friends tell me they can't believe my wife would side with her kid on something so crazy. Others think I should have tried family counseling instead of calling the cops. But come on, once you're dealing with actual flames on your property, therapy isn't exactly the immediate solution. You gotta stop the danger first. I try not to dwell on it too much these days, but it's a daily reminder every time I look at the fence. There's a big scorch mark on the post, even though I replaced a section of it. Sometimes I find myself standing there, remembering that night and feeling a knot in my stomach. But I also feel a sense of justification. I did what I had to do, and if that means my marriage is over, so be it. I'm not going to lose sleep over people who put my life at risk. I guess the cherry on top was that final move with the security footage. That sealed the deal because it proved he wasn't just messing around once. He had a pattern of messing with fire and talking about how he wanted to tick me off. Knowing that gave me closure. I wasn't crazy to think he was aiming to do something harmful. He really was. My wife couldn't spin that evidence into something else, and she had no choice but to accept that her son dug this hole for himself. I'm still kind of shocked she didn't see how dangerous it all was. Maybe she was too wrapped up in guilt over not being able to protect him from everything in life. But sometimes people have to face consequences. That's how you learn and hopefully grow up. Instead, she fought tooth and nail to cover for him, and that's why we ended up here, divorced, with me having a protective order against her kid. Now that all the dust is settled, I'm just trying to move on. Work at the garage keeps me busy. My buddies have been dragging me out for beers every now and then to get my mind off the drama, as they call it. I'll admit it helps to laugh and talk about cars instead of rehashing the same messed up situation. It still hurts to think about how badly this ended, especially since I really did want to make it work. But at least I'm not living in constant fear that I'll wake up to my house in flames. Sometimes I catch myself wondering what it might have been like if my wife had stood with me on enforcing basic rules. Could we have gotten him proper help before it escalated to fire? But that kind of thinking drives me crazy. The bottom line is he's 18 now, an adult under the law, and he chose to do something incredibly dangerous. She chose to side with him no matter what. All I did was protect myself and my property. If that makes me the bad guy in their eyes, so be it. So there you have it. My stepson nearly burned my house down, and I pressed charges. My wife divorced me over it, saying I was basically throwing her kid under the bus. But I wasn't about to lie to the cops or let it slide. Then I found the security footage that proved he'd been planning stunts like that for a while, handed it over, and watched their little crusade against me fall apart. She gets nothing in the divorce, no share of the house, no money, and her son can't come near me or my property without risking jail time. It's crazy how quickly life can turn upside down, but I guess I can't say I regret my decisions. It's insane to think it all started because he hated being told what to do. I try to be a decent stepdad, but in the end, I had to look out for myself. I'd rather be single and safe than living with someone who defends a kid who's willing to torch the house just to prove a point. Part of me is relieved it's over. Sure, I'm lonely sometimes, but I can handle that. My parents are still around, and I've got some good friends who stuck by me. And at least now, I don't have to worry every night about whether I'll wake up to another accident. That's worth more to me than anything else. Anyway, I just wanted to share the story of how my marriage imploded and how I ended up pressing charges on my stepson for basically trying to burn my place down. Some might say I went too far. Others might say I did the right thing. All I know is I'm finally at peace, and if they're both furious with me, that's their issue, not mine. The court agreed that what he did was dangerous and illegal, and I'm not going to apologize for making sure he faced the consequences. If they're shocked by how it all ended, maybe they should have thought twice before playing with fire, literally. That's my life now, and honestly, I'm okay with it.